Thanks so much for having me here. It's when Wendy sent me your profiles, it was really hard to stop reading all the different things that you're all passionate about. So I got a chance to read all your profiles and all the things that you're all working on. And it's very fantastic to hear your level of thinking and your rigor and your passions, because I share a lot of those. I want to tell you a little bit about myself at the beginning. I'm Yoesph. I was born in Ethiopia during a time of crisis. Two crises, actually. One was the famine crisis, and the second was a coup that was taking place from one government to the other. And I got a chance to spend a bit of time in other parts of East Africa growing up. My parents were very curious and very interested to get me an international education so that I can understand the world and be a useful player in it. And the things that I really realized quite fast growing up was, one, that I was coming up in a highly uncertain world. I got into this game of trying to guess where I was going to be or where the world is going to be in a year from now. Sit down and write things down, but when that year came by, pretty much I got everything quite wrong, and everything was changing so fast. Second realization was change was accelerating across everything that comprised our lives. And so, well, if change is a constant, then my job was to be ahead of that change curve and be part of defining what the future that I want to be part of, and being at the front end, at the edge, at the tip of the spear of that change. Because that's how I saw that we could really make an impact and really benefit from that change curve. And so moved from this idea of wanting to find a very typical and traditional path of life to actually solving problems. So having a focus instead of what did I do, but more of what are the problems that I'm trying to solve. Because those tend to be more constant where everything else is changing. And so that inquiry took me to the U.S., and I ended up studying at Harvard. I got a scholarship to spend quite a few years over there. And then I moved to Silicon Valley, again, through that inquiry of how do we actually stay at the tip of the spear, at the edge of innovation, and be at the leading curve of change. And some of the key things that I realized while I was there is that talent is really a key driver of change, and talent is really a key driver of innovation. And so much of my work there was getting the smartest people from around the country to come and solve some really meaningful and really challenging problems. And the way we did it was to get really talented people who were really determined to solve problems. And so while I was working over there, I did not qualify for a visa to continue and do my work in the U.S. Because my academic qualifications and my job description and title did not match in the database. And therefore, I had an opportunity to take a step back and say, okay, what is the next phase of my life? If I want to make the biggest impact in the world, what should I do and where should I be? And so I pulled the world map out and started to look at, okay, where can I move to? What are all the different interesting things that I could do, and the different ways to make the greatest impact in the world? And there are a few key realizations that I came across there that I'd like to share with you that are really applicable and that have brought me to New Zealand and do the things that I do. One is knowledge is highly democratized right now, and we are not just accessing information within our fields, but we can access a lot of information across so many different fields and put those together and see the relations amongst them. And through that mode of thinking, we realize so fast that a lot of the global challenges or local challenges that we're looking at are highly interrelated. They're highly connected. And so if a lot of problems are highly related, then the solutions need to be integrated. So single solution for a single problem does not work anymore because we have access to all the information and knowledge. So for example, the relation between health and food, like those things we might not have fully realized, but those are actually joined at the hip, or agriculture and climate change, or poverty and crime, or biodiversity and local resilience, or well-being and various different components of society. And so when we try to relate all those different things, then we start to think actually in an integrated fashion. One thing I'm very passionate about is food. I believe you all like to eat good food. One thing that we know is in the next 40 years, we have to produce 70% more food than we have at the moment. That is 4,000 times as much food. So that's as much food as we produce in the last 4,000 years. So in the next 40 years, we've got to produce as much food as the world produced in the last 4,000 years. We've got to do all of that while providing healthy food for our populations with less arable land, a lot less fresh water, with high uncertainty of weather. Climate change is definitely affecting our food production capabilities. We have to regenerate fast-dying biodiversity, regenerate our rivers, and do all of that while making sure that future generations have the capability to produce food. Now, that's a massive challenge. That's highly integrated. And so integrated problems require integrated solutions. Second realization is when you're thinking about change and progress and the highly accelerated progress of change that we're seeing is that moving to a small place is actually a huge advantage. Being small can be a huge advantage because it gives you the agility and the speed to test and experiment and move really fast compared to larger places. And that was something that was really unique and attractive about coming to a place like New Zealand, having the core foundations and the infrastructures that you have in a lot of large places, but the agility and the freedom and the openness to experiment and think critically. Because the type of change that we're experiencing, the types of problems we have ahead of us, we can't afford to do incremental change. So we just can't just continue to improve and tweak. We've got to really rethink so much of what we've built, and the technologies and the platforms that we have in front of us give us that opportunity to do so. And so when you're thinking about integrated solutions, the first thing you want to do is create prototypes, create models that the larger places can replicate and utilize. And so small is the new big. And the third realization is that, as I mentioned earlier, innovation is driven by talent in so many ways. And the key thing there is having a high density of really smart people working on focused problems from many different angles. That is how you achieve accentuated progress. That is how you are really leading at the edge in terms of the knowledge and opportunities that you create for identifying global solutions. And so the key things that I see as like the top things for us to really think about in the next 40 years as we think about a small economy like New Zealand operating in a highly globally connected economy is one, is how can we take advantage of this? And there's this thing we call at KiwiConnect, the team that I'm part of, that New Zealand can be an incubation nation, a place where we can develop and incubate globally impactful solutions from. Where everything is changing, the one constant that we have is that the greatest solutions are developed by really smart people working on those challenges. And so if we focus our energy and our effort on a knowledge economy, where we're developing and creating solutions versus just one type of solution, because if that's going to change in 10, 20 years' time, then we can't really just hold on to just one thing. And so I see a greater focus on talent. The second thing is, when we think about global connectivity, there's always that dichotomy between the local and the global. And I think one balance we've got to really get right is that our global connectivity is contributing to the strength of the local economies and local resilience. If the two aren't working hand in hand, then what ends up happening is just value keeps on extracting from the land and the community and place that we live in. And the third one is the opportunity that we have ahead of us is one where we can help design the next evolution of our economy to directly contribute to societal and planetary well-being. So, sometimes you might think the choice that we have between we've got to do something just to grow our economy, but that comes at the cost of our society being well. Actually, the two are really tied at the hip, and so we've got to really think about building new economic models and building new types of businesses and enterprises that are helping address some of our social and environmental challenges, and through that we're creating models and developing solutions that we can export to the world. And we have a unique opportunity to do that right now at this time in New Zealand as we're evolving our economy and as we're evolving what the next 10, 20, 40 years look like for us. So just before I sit down, I have one quick little exercise for you all. Is if you could just close your eyes for a minute and think it is 2056. So we're 40 years ahead of now. And if you could imagine, what is the New Zealand that you want to live in? Like, look around you. What are the social structures that we have? What are the economic structures that we have? What is the ideal state you want your country, your land to be in at that time? You can open your eyes. You can do a lot more of this later on. But if you could just take 30 seconds to write down what are the top 3 things that came to you. If you could just describe what that New Zealand looks like to you. So over the next few hours and day and tomorrow, my challenge to you all is to start working backwards from that vision. So further enhance and develop that vision of the country that you want to live in 40 years from now. And try to think about, what does it really take to get there? What is our path to that direction? And what that will help you to think is, what are the different transformations that we'd like to put in place? What are the ways that we use the opportunities that we have at hand to create the type of country that we want to be in 40 years from now, and the type of country that you want to live for the next generations, for them to start leading it and do the same process, because each generation comes and we change certain aspects of what we have. Thanks very much.